Hello, and welcome to VOW, Voices of Wisdom, the show that might not be for everybody, but everybody needs to watch this show. And I'm your host, Brenda Simmons. Today's show is entitled How Long, Not Long, and it's about the 1965 Civil Rights March. I'm going to read something, a headline that I found. Alabama police attack civil rights marchers on Bloody Sunday. Racial hatred and horribly on display in Selma, Alabama, when police attacked a peaceful march of African American demonstrators on March 7, 1965. The violent encounter injured dozens of protesters, 17 seriously enough to require hospitalization, earning the infamous day the nickname Bloody Sunday. The marchers were protesting both the police slaying of civil rights demonstrator Jimmy Lee Jackson on February 18th, as well as the hostile conditions of Selma and the surrounding area that intimidated African Americans to not vote. The violent police attack was reported by the Aberdeen American News, and that's Aberdeen, South Dakota, on the first page of its March 8, 1965 issue. The troopers break up Negro attempt of 50-mile march. Selma, Alabama, an attempted 50-mile march to the Alabama Capitol at Montgomery by Negroes pleading for civil rights erupted into bloody racial violence in a clash with state policemen on that Sunday. Today, I have on my show today is Terrance Fiore. And he was a part of the 503rd Police Battalion that were called in to protect. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you very much.
How are you today?
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm fine. How are you?
Good. This is an exciting topic. This is Black History Month, so
right.
This is a great topic to talk about now. But first of all, tell us a little background. Where were you born and where were you raised and all that good stuff?
I was born in a hospital in Brooklyn.
Okay.
I started out in Queens. My parents moved to Uniondale in Nassau County in 1951, part of the post-World War II suburban exodus. Mm-hmm. And I grew up there, went to Hofstra College in Hempstead, and bought a vacation house out here in 1987 outside Sag Harbor.
Okay. So we would like to now move on to figure out, how did you get to Selma? I know you had to join the Army or Air Force? Army, right?
Yes.
So tell us that little journey, and then we'll move on from there.
Okay, because yes, this was the 503rd Military Police Battalion, I might add. Well, of course, I graduated from Hofstra in 1964, and at that time there was the draft. Mm-hmm. It was still essentially pre-Vietnam, but you had a choice. If you were in college, you could go to ROTC and become a lieutenant, or you could take your chances and probably get drafted and become a private first class. And I thought Lieutenant Fiore sounded better than PFC Fiore, mm-hmm. So I did 4 years of ROTC, and since it was before the buildup of Vietnam, they would let you pick what branch of the Army you wanted to be in.
Okay.
Later, they just told you were in the infantry,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But fortunately, I got to pick, and I thought I'll probably have a desk job or some sort of job like that for the rest of my life, and I want to do something different and maybe have some little adventures. And so I asked for the Military Police Corps. That sounded kind of cool. And I was assigned to the 503rd. I graduated in May of '64 and got my orders and went down in July of 1964. And I still remember, and I can quote this almost directly from memory because it just stuck with me. Mm-hmm. I got a letter from the battalion adjutant, and it said, among other things, the 503rd is the government's riot control agency for the eastern half of the United States. And I remember thinking, whoa. These are the guys who went down to the integration of the University of Mississippi when James Meredith integrated Mississippi in September of 1962. Mm-hmm. And that was a terrible scene. And, they went down to restore order and protect James Meredith, and this could be a very interesting 2 years.
So that's what she was looking for, you said, right?
Yes.
So eventually, what was the day like when you got the call that you were going to go to protect Martin Luther King and the marchers?
We were expecting the call. We're now jumping.
You were?
We're now jumping to March of 1965, right? We were expecting the call. What we did was, things like the University of Mississippi. We also went down. They also went down, because it was before my time, in 1963 for the integration of the University of Alabama. Remember when George Wallace was standing in the door barring people? Well, right off camera was the 503rd Military Police Battalion.
Okay.
And so we were kind of used to this kind of thing. We trained a lot. We had to be ready to go. We had to be at the Air Force Base with all our equipment loaded on jeeps and trucks within 3 hours after getting our orders to go. So we practiced this a lot.
And their orders came from?
President Johnson.
Okay.
Because after Bloody Sunday, we knew. And our battalion commander canceled all leaves, which are vacations, and 3-day passes for guys. So we were all confined to quarters. And we just kept practicing our 3-hour notice drill, and so we expected to be called. And according to the history books that I've researched, President Johnson signed the orders at 1:30 in the morning on Saturday morning of March 20th.
Okay.
And we were rolling.
Wow. So when you got there, I think was it Maxwell?
Maxwell Air Force Base, outside of Montgomery.
Okay, outside of
terminus
Montgomery.
of the march.
Okay. So when you got there, what was the feel? What was the atmosphere like when you got there?
We were a little nervous. I can remember writing a letter to my then girlfriend in which I could be probably fairly accused of possibly exaggerating the danger somewhat, hoping for a hero's welcome the next time I saw her. Oh, you're my big, brave soldier.
Oh, honey, you're home.
But seriously, I had heard, and many of us had heard stories from the guys who were veterans of the Oxford, Mississippi mission about what this was like. And the police, just to diverge a second, when they were coming in from the Air Force Base and heading towards the campus of the University of Mississippi, the police, this Mississippi State Highway Patrol, set up roadblocks to keep the Army from getting to the campus.
Okay.
So the Alabama State Highway Patrol were instigators and perpetrators, along with the Sheriff's Department of the Dallas County around Selma, and also newly deputized amateur police officers.
Oh, newly deputized.
Newly deputized. The sheriff of Dallas County deputized all white men over 21. Gave them a badge and a club and like a construction hard hat helmet, and said, "You're going to stop this march."
Oh, really?
So you had state police, regular sheriff's deputies, and these amateurs who had no training. But the state police, were definitely involved and guilty of this riot, a police riot against peaceful citizens.
Yes.
So we weren't sure what kind of a greeting we were going to get, whether we would get cooperation or anything else. But fortunately, we did. I guess, I don't know, maybe and this is just my guess, President Johnson, sent us down. He sent another battalion, the 720th, out of Fort Hood also, down. He federalized the Alabama National Guard, and maybe George Wallace just kind of threw in the towel. And we received cooperation from the State Police Department, the Highway Patrol. And I remember being in some meetings that Saturday, doing coordination. What are you going to do? What are we going to do?
After
Where are
you
we going
got
to pick
there.
up? After we got there. And being struck by the fact that they were very cooperative, or appeared to be very cooperative.
So as you went out, you were basically, as we were saying, protecting the march as they marched through, or who you were ordered to protect? What was your exact orders? I'm just curious of what your
Well,
exact...
the orders for the 2 battalions were to essentially escort the marchers
Okay.
and to preserve, public order. And so we had trucks and jeeps in the front of the march, because when it started off, one of the books that I checked said there were only about 3,000 people. And then, they reduced it to only a couple of hundred when the highway narrowed down to one lane in each direction, just for traffic control purposes and to let traffic pass by.
Right.
So we had jeeps and trucks in the front and in the back. We had soldiers marching along both sides of the road, in effect kind of escorting the marchers day by day on the way to Montgomery. We had helicopter overhead. And I can remember sort of being in the Jeep on the point one time. I also spent a day working with my platoon sergeant. Must have been our day off or something, my platoon's day off or something. But we were training a local National Guard unit in riot control techniques.
So as you were marching, like I said, I want to give the audience a feel of almost like being there. People were saying things, people were throwing things, there was what was going on?
People were saying things. There was a lot of heckling from the white bystanders. There was a lot of cheering. You went through the small black communities, a lot of cheering.
Okay.
There was mostly just a concern for us being on the alert. We would check. We would leapfrog patrols out and check out every bridge and overpass and underpass.
Okay, you did do that.
We did do that kind of stuff.
Before the marchers got there?
Before the marchers got there. And then we'd secure it. Then the march would pass, and they'd shoot on, to the next intersection. There were several live bombs that were found and diffused in churches and homes in Selma before the march started.
Really?
And I don't mean Bloody Sunday. I mean the March 21st Sunday.
After you got there?
After we got there, or as we were arriving. So the threats, the concerns were real serious.
Wow. It's just challenging, I think, for some of us to really get a grasp on this. But for you to be there as a white man, I'm sure things were probably even said to you about even being there or trying to protect the black people, or the N-word, as I'm sure you heard
and lovers
many times.
But I don't recall those verbal assaults ever being directed at me.
Good.
Maybe they weren't directed because I would have been up front in front of the march. My driver was an African American, Corporal Moody. Good man. Went airborne and made sergeant. I ran into him later when we were back at Fort Bragg. And he had gone airborne and made sergeant. But the only reason I say that is, for a black guy and a white guy on a Jeep together would have been a target for verbal assault.
Absolutely.
But I don't recall any direct verbal assaults. I do recall a friend of mine who was another lieutenant in Charlie Company, C Company, whose dad was a police sergeant on the Jackson, Mississippi Police Department, and who hailed from Jackson, being upset and resentful of our role down there. He did his job, but he actually said to me later, on another occasion after the march and after we had returned back to Fort Bragg, that he was hoping that the demonstrators would lose control, and we would have to put a riot by the marchers. We'd have to put down a riot by the marchers rather than protecting the marchers from the local population. Yes, I distinctly remember him saying that. We had lots of talks about integration and stuff. He was a good guy, but he was a hardcore segregationist. And those are almost mutually exclusive terms. But, but Martin Luther King wouldn't have considered them mutually exclusive terms.
Right,
And,
right.
he looked for the divine spark in everybody.
Right, right. So you coming from here and going to there, that was like kind of really like out of another realm for you, wasn't it?
It was a big change. I mean, I had never been to the South before. I'd been up to the Northeast into Canada on debate tournaments. I was on the debate team. I had been to Ohio. You remember, this is I graduated in '64. Kids didn't take planes all over the country.
Right, right.
We didn't go shooting down to Acapulco on spring break in high school. And plus, I was interested in this because the early demonstrators, whom they call the Nashville kids, the ones who started the sit-ins in Nashville, Tennessee, in 1960, were only a couple of years older than
I was going to get to that.
John Lewis was born in 1940. I was born in 1943. Diane Nash, I think, is only like 2 years older than I am. So they were doing this stuff. And as I have said to some other people, as I said at the library, I'm going to soccer practice at Hofstra, and I'm going out to parties or out for a beer after soccer practice. These guys are going marching after class. And they're going to jail. I'm going to soccer practice and out for a beer after class. They're going to jail after class. So they caught my attention and they caught my imagination, and they were always sort of, heroic is too strong a word, but in a funny way, role model figures for what young people with courage could do. It was an exciting time. It was an exciting time to be a young person in the 60s. They struck down the anti-miscegenation laws in Virginia. There was a one-man, one-vote law. The Miranda was passed at about that time. A lot of change going on. Times they are changing.
That's right. You were talking about a story you want to share about what happened, something that you experienced prior to the march.
Oh, yes. When I went down, almost right after I got there, about 2 weeks after I joined the outfit, we went on field maneuvers in South Carolina, the 82nd Airborne, war games, thousands of troops. And our battalion went down, and we were camped out at an abandoned farm outside a small town, Cheraw, South Carolina. And our job was to escort convoys, traffic control, escorting convoys, shutting down highways and crowd control when there were parachute jumps, and just patrolling all over the county, maybe multiple counties. And we had a problem because for our integrated patrols, if you had a black soldier and a white soldier, together in a Jeep, there was no place for the black guy to eat. And they would often be gone, too far. They couldn't come back to our home base for a meal or a cup of coffee or something like that. So what we had to do, and I was assigned to do it, was negotiate some sort of a compromise with the guys in the Cheraw Cafe and other small little restaurants and diners and stuff like that around. And the compromise that we negotiated was that if an integrated team came in, or I guess two black guys, but most of the times they were integrated teams, they would be seated. Both of them would be seated at the table together. They could order, and that was a first.
I was thinking.
That was a first.
This was what year again?
This is the fall of 1960, August, September, October of 1964.
And where now?
We're in a town of 7,000 people in Cotton Country, South Carolina.
Okay. I just want to emphasize that. Yeah. Continue.
And so we did, but what they did is the white waitress, that's a sexist term.
Oh, it is?
The white server. The white server would serve the meal to the white MP, and they would bring out a black kitchen worker from the kitchen to present and put the plate down on the table for the black soldier.
You got to be serious.
I am dead serious, and that was progress.
And it was progress. I'm sitting here thinking of putting myself in that place. I guess in my eyes, in their eyes, it was progress. In my eyes, I'm saying, you got to be kidding me. But I guess for that black gentleman to be sitting there To be able to be sitting there.
And probably only because he was in uniform.
And only because
It just
he was
occurred
in
to
uniform.
me. I mean, but I'm willing to bet. I'm willing to bet, next day, a black and a white local in civilian
It
clothes
wouldn't
would
happen.
not have gotten
It
away with
wouldn't
it.
happen.
This was an accommodation for us because, they were patriotic. They saluted the flag. They respected the military.
So I'm just curious about when you did those negotiations. You would go in there, and what would you say to them?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm 21 years old, and I'm just trying to use common sense. And I'm saying, I only remember that's what we did. But I imagine I probably said something like, "Look, you got to help me out here. Here's our situation. This is unacceptable. We got to do this the right way. And what can we do?"
And I'm curious. I would think even the black soldiers might even been hesitant, because knowing the area, knowing the atmosphere, knowing the time, I would even think they might have been a little leery about saying, "Okay, I hope this is okay."
I don't remember, but I think they would have been told, this is the deal, and here's where they'll accept you on these terms, and they were in uniform, and that, not always. There's another story about 4 black men coming up from Florida after a summer reserve training who were killed in uniform.
Where was
in their
this?
civilian car. But usually the uniform, gave you a lot of cover.
You want to expand on that little story before we got like 5 minutes?
I always used to wear my uniform whenever I was driving my little white Volkswagen with New York plates up from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, from Fayetteville,
Wow.
North Carolina, north
Wow.
on vacation or on a 3-day pass to visit that girlfriend. I thought, so that when some state trooper pulled over the little white Yankee car with Yankee plates on it, there I was.
Right.
With my
So
Army
you
uniform
seem
on.
like you're avoiding. You'd rather not talk about the incident.
Oh,
you
no, I'm
just mentioned
sorry.
about the-
I was just thinking about how the uniform gave you
Oh,
cover.
yeah,
and I
yeah,
thought
yeah.
that's why I was chuckling there a
Yeah.
little bit. But what was your question? I beg
The
your pardon.
story about, you said the 4 men from Florida who
Oh,
got
that is
killed?
just something I remember reading about the era, and it was probably from Taylor Branch's trilogy on what's it called? I think America in the King years. And it just came to mind that because I remember being struck by that. Here they were in uniform. It's clear,
Right.
they're just going home, but they were still targeted by probably the last ditch resistance of the Klan. But another time, we got moved and we got posted outside Darlington, South Carolina.
Okay.
And my platoon sergeant came to me and he said, the Darlington Police Department has invited us to use their recreation center. And it had a pool. I said, everybody?
Okay.
No, sir, just the white troops. And I said, well, we can't. And he said, but sir, it's not fair to our white soldiers. He says,
It's
well,
not fair
this
to
is a
you.
white Southern guy of about 30, 35 years of age, a career Army sergeant, right? And so I think this is an interesting window into the way people would think. That's discrimination. But if we don't, we're discriminating against our white guys. He says, why should most of our men be denied the opportunity to go into an air-conditioned recreation center and go for a swim in a nice pool because only a few of our people aren't welcome there?
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting? And I thought to myself, well, you know all about unit cohesiveness and unit integrity and morale, and I don't have to tell you that. But I still had to kind of I'm 21, he's 30 or 35,
Right,
he's supposed to
right.
be showing me the ropes.
Right.
And I thought to myself, okay, Terry, you're supposed to be in charge here. Put on your big boy pants and tell him, no, we are
Yeah.
not going to accept the invitation.
Right.
Which is what we did. We politely declined. But it still was like, okay,
Yeah.
time to grow up.
Yeah, that was a challenge. But that's where the rubber hits the road, right?
That's where the rubber hits the road, Are you in charge or aren't you?
Absolutely.
And what do you believe? And
That's what I was thinking. What do you believe?
What do you believe? And can you exercise that?
Absolutely.
in this situation?
Absolutely. Because one can believe it,
and still wimp out.
That's right. That's
And,
right.
you know, if I had let him go, I would have been, I was nominally in charge. I'm the lieutenant, he's the sergeant. But as I said, you know, he's 10, 15 years older than I am. He's the one with the experience. He's the one who's showing me around. What are you going to do? Put your big boy pants on.
That's it. That's it. You know, we have like 2 minutes left. I just wanted to also go back to the march. Now, was it 50-mile march?
It was a 50-mile march.
So
Took 4 days.
how it took 4 days. So you were involved all 4 days?
We were, well, as I mentioned, I was out one day, but yes, both units were involved all 4 days. And we basically walked them through to Montgomery. We had a rumor that came down that somebody's going to try and assassinate Dr. King. And we had sharpshooters posted on every block with another guy, with a teammate, looking at, you know, the windows and the rooftops of the buildings across the street, because this is only 2 years after President Kennedy was killed.
Right, right.
Year and a half. But fortunately, that didn't happen. But we had to be on alert for that at the march itself while he's coming in with the marchers.
Okay, my last question.
Sure.
How did that change you? Or how did it affect you? Or how do you think that might have changed you or affected you, that whole experience?
Well, it affected me in a couple of different ways. First of all, as I said, these guys were role models, if not heroic figures for me. So I was very pleased to be able to help protect them, and in a very, very small way, to have a small supporting role in this campaign to promote justice. And it was a high point of my 2 years in the military. When the marchers were leaving, somebody turns and he looks right at me and he says, "Thank you, Lieutenant."
Wow.
You know, I still remember that.
Wow.
And when you look at Vietnam coming up, and the 50,000 people who lost their lives in I don't want to call it a mistake because a lot of people still think it was not a mistake, but in a campaign that did not end in success. You know, I got to be a good guy.
That's good. That's good.
How many guys can say that who were in at that era?
Terry, thank you.
I had some adventures, and I got to be a good guy.
That's great. Terry, thank you. This has been a great interview. I appreciate it. This is VOW, Voices of Wisdom, and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Brenda.
You're welcome.